Welcome to PHADA's virtual 2021 annual convention and exhibition. This session is the new NSPIRE Rule and implementation plans. Before we begin, we'd like to take a moment and review the logistics of today's webinar. All attendees' cameras and microphones will be muted throughout the event. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. At any time during the session, please use the Q&A link in the toolbar to submit your questions. We ask that you not use the chat feature, as we will not be monitoring this for audience questions. We are recording this session and will make it available on the Whova web and mobile apps afterwards. And as a reminder, the discussions in this session are not for media use. For quotes and more information, please contact PHADA directly. And now we'd like to introduce Seth Embry, Policy Analyst of PHADA, who will present the welcome remarks.
Good morning and welcome. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary Ashley Sheriff of REAC over at HUD to talk about the NSPIRE Rule and implementation, and when we get to Q&A, any of the other burning questions you have about REAC. We have recently we published a short kind of update on REAC, on the new acting Deputy Assistant Secretary who took over for our good friend Dave Vargas, who's now running the Emergency Housing Voucher Program. But not only Ash, as she's known, but two deputies to that position that are also new. And so a lot of personnel changes at REAC, and I won't go into the entire bio, which you can read on the app or in the agenda, but I will say that Ash has, many years of experience both at HUD and in the affordable housing industry. She's well versed in these issues. Also, although she's new and acting over at REAC, she is more than qualified and capable of handling all the challenges that REAC has. Very well versed in what's going on over at REAC, and I think she'll be a great partner to PHADA in the industry, just as Dave Vargas was before her, and just as DJ was before him, DJ Lavoie, for all those who remember that Deputy Assistant Secretary. So with no further ado, and to hopefully maximize the amount of time that we can spend with Ash, I turn it over to her for her presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Seth, for that really great introduction. I definitely should have you introduce me at all of these events, but I really want to say thank you to you and everybody at PHADA for all you do, and for your members for all you do as well, to provide affordable housing to so many of our nation's most vulnerable and resilient families. And certainly we cannot thank you enough for your work and partnership over the past 15 to 16 months, as you have kept families housed during the pandemic, through often extremely challenging and difficult circumstances, both for those families as well as your own families, and for the families and individuals that work in your organization. So we recognize how hard you've all been working and appreciate the continued partnership in that regard. I'm hoping that the next virtual conference will be because we want to have a virtual conference and not because we have to have a virtual conference. So hopefully next time maybe we'll be in person and I'll get to meet many of you. And I have had the chance to meet many of you virtually already, but looking forward to those in-person meetings as well. So with that, I'm going to dive into the presentation, and give me 1 second. And hopefully everybody can see my screen now. But so we're here today to talk about NSPIRE, and certainly we can touch on some other subjects that may be on your mind as it pertains to REAC. As Seth said, even though I'm relatively new in the position, I've actually been affiliated with REAC in one way or another many times over the last 18 years. Prior to coming to HUD, I was in the affordable housing industry as a consultant. And, REAC was one of my first clients all the way back in 2003. So it's an organization I'm very familiar with and very passionate about. And am very excited to be in this new role and work with you all. I view you all at both PHADA and the members that comprise PHADA as our partners, like I said. And, we are in this together and we have shared goals. And I look forward to hearing from all of you as we talk through Inspire today and talk through other issues that REAC will encounter from time to time, and always encourage you to not be shy and to tell us kind of what you think about what we're doing, both good and maybe sometimes not so good. So that's how we end up being a better organization, and that's how we end up with better policies that collectively meet our shared objectives. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the current kind of state of REAC and obviously some of the recent news about us resuming inspections. That is very much tied into Inspire, as you may know, based on the communication that has been issued both by HUD all the way up to the Secretary's office, as well as from the Real Estate Assessment Center. Inspire is a big part of our plans for resuming operations, but it's also part of a much bigger effort, right? And we appreciate many of yours participation in the Inspire effort. We'll talk a little bit about the proposed rule, and we've received several hundred comments on that. We'll talk about the demonstrations that are going on. And once again, thank you for those that have volunteered to participate in those demonstrations. And then we'll end with questions and comments and provide some kind of closing information on staying up to date with Inspire and Inspire for vouchers. So I did want to start today by talking about the kind of REAC current state of operations, right? And like many of you, we have been operating in what we kind of refer to as a pandemic state of operations, right? And really an unprecedented state of operations for all of us. And those that have been following REAC and our physical inspections in particular have known that we have, for all intents and purposes, we substantially paused our inspections in March of 2020. Although we did continue inspections after March of 2020, that was primarily in emergency situations. And we did partially resume some inspections of multifamily properties beginning in the October-November timeframe. But even there, we did very few inspections. But here we are today, and things are hopefully, fingers crossed, changing for the better, right? Millions and millions of Americans have been vaccinated, and the Secretary of HUD, along with our leadership in PIH and multifamily, believe that inspections are a vital part of public safety as well, and keeping residents safe. And we believe the time has come to resume inspections, but we want to do that very carefully, obviously, right? So the way that we're going about doing this is to, first target those high-risk properties as identified by the public housing and multifamily program offices, and then, really focusing on resident health and safety, identifying those especially life-threatening defects that may be present at a property, and ensure that those are remediated accordingly. We will, as I mentioned, Inspire is a big part of our return to operations. And so for the public housing high-risk properties, we will be using the Inspire Standards 2.1, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we go through the presentation. And, we will be using that standard to just identify, life-threatening and other defects, but those will not be scored, right? We do not have a scoring methodology that we published for NSPIRE inspections at this point in time. And that is, very much a work in process and in the nascent stages. Eventually, many months from now, there will likely be a scoring notice published. But until then, we can still use the NSPIRE standard, right, to identify defects, and especially those life-threatening defects. One big change in our resumption of inspections is we will be providing a 28-day notice as opposed to a 14-day notice. Those PHAs and multifamily POAs that, will be receiving an inspection will be notified 28 days in advance of that inspection. They will be notified again 14 days in advance of that inspection with a follow-up notification. We strongly encourage you all to let us know if there are, circumstances on the ground at your properties where we would want to have a dialogue about whether or not it makes sense to postpone the inspection. We won't be canceling inspections of our high priority properties, but we may postpone them under certain circumstances. And we also recognize that certain localities have specific restrictions on what can and cannot be done locally. And so please apprise us of those as well. Although we, certainly see many of these restrictions lifting throughout the country, we are not seeing all of them lift throughout the country. So, we try to keep tabs on what's going on locally, but help us out in that regard. And you can let us know that by getting in contact with the information provided in the notification, which generally, is calling our Technical Assistance Center, or TAC. If all goes as planned, which is right now, we're very much on track for that, we will begin resuming inspections on June 1st, 2021. And many properties have probably already received their 28-day notice. I will say, in addition to the property specific notices, we have sent a letter to all of those properties that are either a high priority property or an NSPIRE demo property in the public housing universe, as well as those properties that are likely to be inspected in multifamily. So even beyond the 28-day notice, if you receive that letter, that means that you should expect a REAC inspector to show up at some point between now and the end of the calendar year. So that's just another layer of notification that we're giving to folks. Inspectors will be following a defined COVID protocol that is being informed or has been informed by several conversations in the most recent guidance from the CDC. We have not, just to put it out there because it might be a question, those protocols were developed before the CDC's latest announcement. And as of right now, we don't have any plans on revisiting the protocol. So what that means, I think kind of very plainly is, inspectors will still be required to be outfitted with PPE, including masks. And just because the CDC, recently changed its guidance, we're not changing our protocols at this time. Certainly, as public health conditions change and maybe more information is known, we could revisit those, but we would certainly let you all know. But for now, the protocols that have been posted to HUD's website are still the protocols, and those will not be changing, I think, anytime soon. And then lastly, I think, a question that I get very regularly is, are you exploring the use of remote video inspections? And the answer is yes, we love remote video inspections. Of course, as is the case with anything the federal government does, we have to go through a process in order to be able to use and do certain things a little bit differently. And while we've been able to make RVI available as a way of conducting the self-inspections that you all do for various property portfolios, we at HUD, to include that as part of our inspection toolkit, have to go through that kind of internal process. And we are actually doing that as we speak. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll be able to add RVI to our inspection toolkit very, very soon, and possibly make that part of our inspections. So with that, the NSPIRE proposed rule, let's get to the meat of the discussion, right? So what it does. We think, and we're very excited about the kind of the main, one of the main purposes and drivers of NSPIRE, right, is the alignment of inspection standards across multiple HUD programs, right? So public housing and multifamily properties, as well as voucher units, and even CPD units as well, and Office of Healthcare Program units also. We, over the years, have had alignment across the public housing and multifamily portfolios with UPCS. UPCS is not, significantly different than HQS, but we've had 2 million plus units of voucher units subject to a different standard, for example. And, and so, as part of our efforts to develop NSPIRE and in our conversations with OMB and Congress, one of the historical questions that's been asked over multiple years, not just recently, is, why HUD don't you use a consistent standard across your property inspections? And so that's really what NSPIRE does. And so recognizing that, of course, voucher units may not have some of the same inspectable areas that a public housing property may have, but for the most part, there's ways that you can align the standards across the two portfolios, keeping in mind some of the unique differences that may be encountered, like I said, with inspectable areas in particular. So, the NSPIRE proposed rule also implements a new annual self-inspection and reporting requirement for certain HUD housing, both public housing and multifamily. One of the things that we're also very excited about is the required electronic closeout of all health and safety deficiencies. Over the years, we have managed to, across public housing and multifamily, effectuate our closeout, kind of policies and procedures, but requiring the electronic closeout of all of these, we think will benefit everybody in the process, especially residents. And then, the rule also commits HUD to publishing our standards, our scoring. I mentioned the scoring notice, which is, forthcoming, and other processes in the Federal Register for public comment. And we have received a lot of public comment, over 700 comments on the NSPIRE proposed rule, and several hundred comments more on the recently published NSPIRE 2.1 standards. And we're very, very busily, reviewing those comments and compiling our responses to those comments. So we know you're paying attention, which is great. And that's like I said at the beginning, you not being shy, will result in this being a better standard that works better for everybody. So thank you very much for your comments. And then, the NSPIRE rule also incorporates the provisions of the Economic Growth and Recovery Act, Regulatory Relief and Consumer Protection Act that will reduce admin burden on small and rural PHAs. Two key features of that is that will mean that the PHAS score will be based on physical score only, and that, these properties would only be inspected every 3 years unless troubled. So we're excited to be implementing aspects of that act as well in our NSPIRE approach. So the status of the proposed rule is, it was published in the Federal Register on January 13th, 2021, and the 60-day public comment period expired approximately 2 months ago. Like I said, we received over 700 comments from 75 unique sets of comments that were submitted. And we are, like I said, busily reviewing and analyzing these comments. And just want to say there's been lots of great feedback and appreciate that very, very much. And, we will be taking those comments and ultimately planning for an early 2022 publication of the final rule. And so, kind of be on the lookout for that, as well as kind of other NSPIRE materials and rules or notices that will be coming. Like I said, the scoring notice, as well as an administrative notice eventually that will come, I think, right at the end as we figure out kind of, how we make sure that there's remediation, right? Administrative remediation that occurs post-inspection, right? And that administrative notice will also include the policies and procedures for appealing inspection results and things like that. So a lot goes into updating our standards to NSPIRE. So stay tuned. Of course, I think one of the things that we're most excited about right now in terms of NSPIRE, and we appreciate the eagerness of many of you, is kicking off in earnest the NSPIRE demonstrations. And so, like so many things as a result of the pandemic, you know, we have postponed our NSPIRE demonstration effort over a year now. And, you know, we think the NSPIRE demonstration effort is essential, right, to testing the NSPIRE standards, getting some real world data, you know, across, you know, several thousand inspections to make sure that when we do operationalize NSPIRE, right, it achieves what we all think it will achieve, and it's all, you know, hopefully very pro forma at that point. Like there's no surprises, right? We've done these kind of, you know, several thousand inspections under the demo. We've collected a lot of data. We've shared that data with all of you. You know, we all see kind of what an NSPIRE inspection looks like, right? And then, you know, additionally, what an NSPIRE scoring methodology could look like. So the two concurrent demonstrations that are underway are the NSPIRE for public housing and multifamily properties, and the NSPIRE for vouchers. And so because of the pandemic, we are extending both of these demonstrations until 2022. And that will give us a chance to scale up to get more data and information into HUD. Even with the pandemic and even with the pause, we still very much believe in the importance and criticality of conducting the NSPIRE demonstration. And so we need to make sure that we have enough time to go out there and conduct the inspections using the NSPIRE standards. And like I said, really roll our sleeves up and dig into the data and dig into the results and see what it tells us, right? So I think this is a great example of you know, informed policy making. And so and like I said, we plan on being very transparent throughout that process and sharing the information with all of you. And certainly the volunteers that are participating in the NSPIRE demo will be receiving the results of their inspections, right? So they'll get a chance to see kind of, this is what an NSPIRE inspection looks like up close. And I know because I had my property participate in that. And so other provisions of the participation remained unchanged, you know, in terms of our volunteers and who is interested. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. So, so far, over 4,450 public housing and multifamily properties have been approved to participate in the NSPIRE demo, which is just short of the goal of 4,500 properties. You know, certainly, you know, we encourage you to continue to volunteer. You know, we do have, I guess at this point, a little bit of a waiting list, but that doesn't mean that we won't have some folks drop out along the way. And so if you're interested in being a volunteer in the NSPIRE demonstration, you know, please get in touch with us. And I think at the end of this presentation, there's some information about doing just that. If not, it's definitely on the website, which is provided at the end of the presentation. And then, we've published so far 3 versions of the NSPIRE standards, 1.0, 1.3, and most recently 2.1 on the NSPIRE website for comment. And we've actually received over 550 comments to date on those respective standards. And so once again, thank you very much for your interest in what we're doing. That's great. And then we kind of recently ended, just about 10 or 11 days ago, our call to action on version 2.1 of the standards, and are currently reviewing the comments that we've received on NSPIRE 2.1. And so similar to the comments we've received on the NSPIRE rule published in January, we are going through those comments very rigorously, and we'll be providing responses to those comments accordingly. And then additionally, while we're doing that, we are doing standards workshops for demonstration participants, and trying to get everybody as up to speed as we possibly can about the new NSPIRE 2.1 standards. So once again, these are kind of our efforts to make sure everybody knows what's going on, make sure there's no surprises. So far the reception has been very positive with respect to our volunteers and those that are eager to participate in the NSPIRE demonstration. The NSPIRE demonstration, like other inspections, will resume in June. And while it's part of the broader resumption of operations, I want to take a second and distinguish the NSPIRE demonstration from the NSPIRE inspections that will be occurring of high priority public housing properties. There is a little bit of overlap between some of our NSPIRE demonstration volunteer properties and some of those high priority properties that have been identified, but there's actually not a tremendous amount of overlap. So in a way, the NSPIRE demo is a separate effort or work stream under our resumption of inspections than our inspections of high priority properties that just happen to be using NSPIRE. And that doesn't mean we won't be collecting the information from those NSPIRE inspections of high priority properties and similarly analyzing them to learn as much as we possibly can. But the demo has a very specific purpose and a very specific set of properties, which are very largely separate from those high priority properties that will be inspected using NSPIRE. So like I said, there is a little bit of overlap between the two groups, but not a lot. So I'll now turn to NSPIRE for vouchers. And like the NSPIRE demonstration for public housing and multifamily properties, there is an extension until 2022 that is in process. That extension has not been finalized as of yet, but we expect that will be finalized very shortly, which will allow us to continue the NSPIRE demonstration into 2022 and collect additional information and as necessary, and not feel kind of artificially compressed, right? And not collect or not have as many data points for our analysis. So we have 113 volunteer PHAs to date, and certainly we are renewing our call for volunteers. And so thank you to those that have already volunteered, and we hope that you go out and encourage your colleagues and peers to also volunteer. But we do need more volunteers for NSPIRE for vouchers. And then we transitioned from what was more commonly known as UPCS-V to NSPIRE-V, V standing for vouchers, earlier this year. We effectively made that transition as part of the rule that was published in January. And so, while certainly there was probably a significant amount of overlap between UPCS-V and NSPIRE-V, NSPIRE-V achieves that alignment goal, which I talked about earlier. So, the UPCS-V effort was taking the UPCS standards for public housing and multifamily inspections and applying those to voucher units, as many of you know. But similar to us moving from UPCS ideally to NSPIRE, we need to bring the UPCS-V, right, effort into alignment with NSPIRE. And so thus is born NSPIRE-V. So we've been working on that. And so far 1,300 properties have been inspected using the NSPIRE standards. And actually, 1,300 properties constitutes several thousand units. And many of the participants so far that have been helping us with the NSPIRE-V demonstration, they we're conducting inspections during the pandemic. Not a lot, probably not nearly as many as we would have hoped, but we did continue to make progress in that regard, and appreciate the PHAs that were able to use that standard, to inspect, vacant units especially, but other units as well, when there's been turnover and what have you. So we continue to make progress with Inspire V as well. So with that, I am going to stop and turn it back to Seth for any questions that he may have, or that you all may have with respect to Inspire or other goings on at the Real Estate Assessment Center.
Great, thanks a lot, Ash. That was great, and some new information there as well. So particularly around exploring the use of RVI for the public housing multifamily inspection. So, when REAC's initial RTO, return to operations plan, came out last fall, our members were really concerned, and provided a lot of feedback. We use that feedback, sent a letter to Dave Vargas, who was there at the time. Obviously, the pandemic continued, and so that didn't go the way the department wanted to go. But one of the suggestions we put forward then was to explore the use of RVI, because that was something that had already been initiated on the HCV side, and obviously there's a different regulatory and statutory kind of framework that allows but sometimes mandates different procedures for the different programs, which you kind of talked about a little bit, when talking about Congress asking about aligning these standards or why they aren't aligned. It's like, at the same time, hey, Congress, like, you're writing the rules for these programs, kind of look in the mirror if you're curious about why they're not aligned. That being neither here nor there, it's great to hear that process is going on, because I think it can provide some efficiencies for the department, but also just encourage the use of technology across programs, both from your perspective, from the PHA, and the owner's perspective. And so that's great. I do want to go ahead and take the first question we have in Q&A. And for all those participants in the Q&A, you can place your questions, and I'll pass those on to Ash. And then I have, of course, a bunch of questions myself that I hope I have some time to ask as well. So the first question goes to the health and safety deficiencies under Inspire. And so Ash was talking about the ways that you can provide comment to the standards. So if you go to the REAC site, to the Inspire site, all the standards are listed, and there's a separate page for the health and safety deficiencies under Inspire. And so if you go to that page, it lists all the health and safety deficiencies, but the standards will include whether there's a health and safety kind of designation for the particular deficiencies, and at what level. And so this question is about that. Why are there standard health and safety deficiencies? If a deficiency is a health and safety deficiency, it should have a 24-hour correction period. So they're arguing for a straightforward kind of, is this a health and safety issue, yes or no, versus kind of the stratification that you have in there right now. And I think the commenter makes an important point, which is the label that you give to a deficiency is very important, as PHAs are accountable to the public, who may not be aware of the difference between a standard health and safety deficiency versus a routine maintenance deficiency. So do you want to talk about that a bit?
Sure. Thank you, Seth, and thank you to the questioner. So I couldn't agree more, right? The labels that we give deficiencies are very, very important. And, certainly that's something that we have weighed throughout the development of the Inspire protocols, and the deficiencies that are part of the Inspire 2.1 and past versions of the Inspire standards. And so, I'll just give you a little context, and then, let you know that we certainly are open to reconsidering, right? And so, this is not a final rule at this point in time, and we've received, like I said, hundreds of comments. But and maybe, you know, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is what are the labels, right? So, but the thought process there was that you could have deficiencies, right? That you know, I think we might all objectively consider to be health and safety concerns, right? But in certain cases, it may not be feasible, right, for a PHA or a property owner agent to remediate those defects within 24 hours. And so, you know, certainly one that comes to mind is infestation, right? So, and so, you know, this is something that we've weighed with, right? And so, you know, and you know, the idea is, you know, in recognition, right, that there are deficiencies that could pose health and safety concerns, but may not be either immediately life-threatening and or may not be those deficiencies that you can immediately remedy, that you would have, you know, these kind of, you know, standards, so to speak, as the questioner put in the question, health and safety deficiencies, which would be remediated over a different time frame potentially. And those are things that we will certainly be looking at and evaluating as part of the NSPIRE demonstration. You know, is there and will there continue to be, right, this set of defects that we want HUD and we all want as operators of, you know, affordable housing to be, you know, those extremely, you know, potentially dangerous and severe life-threatening defects that, hey, like we all agree, yeah, we need to fix that in 24 hours versus, you know, other defects that we would say, you know, hey, yeah, that's a health and safety concern, may not create an immediate life-threatening issue or a life-threatening issue at all, but we expect it to still be remediated within a certain period of time. So you will be looking at that. I've actually incidentally had some conversations on that just this week, internal. And so that's something that's very much kind of top of mind for us, right? And you know, maybe we need to change the label, right? You know, maybe we all kind of collectively agree we don't have an issue with, you know, this particular deficiency needing to be remediated within a certain period of time. Let's say it's not 24 hours, but it's 7 days, for example. But maybe let's call it something different, right? So that you know, people don't get maybe the wrong idea that this is something that you know, is maybe much more severe than we think it is. So so yeah, this is a great question, and one that I actually I was talking about this morning. Facts. So very timely.
Great. And I think, you know, on that, the quintessential example, one of them for that issue is the cabinet standard, which does have a standard health and safety designation, which, you know, most people would be really puzzled to connect our traditional understanding of health and safety to a cabinet where you have, you know, I think the standard is 25% missing, you know, for deficiency under NSPIRE. And so I think it's really good to hear that you're thinking about that, because those, you know, at the end when this is rolled out, you know, as a PHA, you know, I've got to, if I'm a PHA executive director or an owner of a property inspector under the standard, I've got to, you know, be able to face the public and say, we have these health and safety issues. And, you know, if I'm including some missing cabinets in there, as serious as that might be for the quality of the unit and the experience of the tenant, it is not obviously on the level of other health and safety issues. And so I'm glad that that's being talked about. Could you talk more about the rollout of NSPIRE V in terms of timeline going with NSPIRE? Now, you talked about a final rule coming out potentially in 2022 for NSPIRE. You talked about switching from UPCS-V to NSPIRE V, but ultimately, will these demonstrations will obviously be conducted being conducted concurrently. Do you anticipate that they'll be finalized concurrently as well?
Another great question, Seth. I think really kind of to be determined. So, there's certainly a possibility that they could be finalized concurrently. I think there would definitely be some folks that you know, on the Hill and otherwise, that are very interested in seeing these finalized concurrently. You know, but we also have to kind of look at what makes sense operationally, and you know, we fully recognize, right, that the kind of the inspection process and rule set and conduct is different, right? For voucher units, right? That has been inspections, you know, that have been conducted, you know, by the PHA, you know, historically for years and years and years using the HQS standards, and you know, those have not been the purview of either REAC inspectors or our contract inspector partners. Now, there have been times in our history, as I think many of you know, where we've been called to action and have had to roll up our sleeves and conduct you know, inspections of voucher units. You know, in recent history, the state of Maine comes to mind about 6 or 7 years ago, where you know, we were asked to conduct inspections of several hundred voucher units in that state, you know, because of certain circumstances up there. But you know, we recognize, right, that you know, HQS inspections and inspections of voucher units have been something that has been you know, owned by, you know, PHAs historically, and so that's very different than the independent inspections that REAC conducts of the public housing and multifamily properties, and you know, recognizing that you also conduct self-inspections of those properties as well. So we're going to take a good look at it, Seth. I would guess, and this is totally, I'll just say, speculative, that they would probably be finalized close together, but I don't know that they'll be finalized at exactly the same time or implemented at exactly the same time. And, you know, that's an area that we will also be engaging in dialogue with you all about. And, you know, one other thing I'll throw out there, right? And that is, you know, we have all been affected by the pandemic in terms of our normal operations. And that's something that we take into consideration too, right? Which is to say, you know, what should be the timing of certain shifts, right? Or the implementation of certain new policies in light of that, right? Do those need to be delayed at all? And do we need to think about, you know, for example, you know, do we stick with certain standards for a longer period of time to kind of give people a chance to kind of get their feet back under them? And you know, I think that's going to be the case to a large extent, but at the same time, you know, we also can't continue to like make progress, right? We've been working on NSPIRE for a long time, and you know, I also like the old cliche, you know, the timing's never perfect, right? You know, so, but we will work very closely with you all to figure out what the timing of implementing NSPIRE V looks like, right? And do it in a way that, you know, hopefully makes a lot of sense, and people can say, okay, I'm good with that. I can prepare for that, you know, so I know that there'll still be some dialogue in that regard. But yeah, great question.
Sure, thanks. Now we've gotten a couple questions on a really important issue, which is about tenant cost damages in these inspections and how we consider that. When Dave Vargas first came back to REAC, I guess in 2018 or 19, I guess it's probably 2019. I'm not sure. But when he first came back, we had a meeting. I remember as our executive director, Tim Kaiser, was there. I was there. Dave was there over at the REAC building. And I brought with me an advocate article from May of 2010, I believe, in which it talked about a meeting that PHADA leadership and PHAs had with Dave Vargas, who was at REAC at that point. And one of the issues that were brought up were tenant caused damage in the inspections and how those damages relate to point deductions. And he, in that meeting, he talked about that being a challenge to figure out how to account for that in the inspection and in the scoring. And so we have, just like, probably every industry group or PHA that commented on the rules has raised that issue. It is important. It's an issue of fairness, and it's an issue that, as you are working to overhaul the complete kind of protocol, the scoring, that there's not a better time to address it. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about the challenges of holding PHAs and owners harmless for tenant caused damage, and how you think the department will go forward as to that question, because it's top of mind for everyone who gets an inspection.
Another great question, Seth, and for the questioners. Tenant caused damage as an issue is something that's been around as long as the REAC's been around. So when I did my first work at REAC back in 2003, this was an issue we discussed back then. And certainly, that is the fact that it's been kind of an issue for that long, might be a little bit reflective of the fact that we haven't quite figured it out yet. So, there are from time to time certain things that, you never, find a resolution where everybody is happy, right? But I don't think this is one of those. I think we can continue to address the issue, and I think it's a legitimate issue, right? And so, one of the things that I think we will be looking at very hard as part of the eventual scoring of NSPIRE is, to what extent can we use the new standards and just our research and analysis and, not just ours, but your all's as well, and your experience dealing with this, to inform the scoring in such a way as to, potentially recognize that there are tenant caused damage that does occur, right? And make sure that folks are not inadvertently penalized for that. So it's a discussion I want to have. I'm willing to tackle it head on. I think it's there are some challenges, but it's also the case, and I'm just going to put it out there that our collective knowledge of inspections and our collective knowledge of deficiencies that are observed as part of inspections, has come a long way since UPCS 2.0, way back at REAC's inception. And we have a lot of information, a lot of data. You all have a lot of information, a lot of data. And our QA inspectors and others that we've discussed this issue with, they have some thoughts, and I think we need to take that kind of collective body of knowledge and see if we can get smarter about this, right? And NSPIRE at the end of the day, right? NSPIRE gives us all a great opportunity to, it's the first major effort, really in 2+ decades to revise kind of HUD's inspection standards. And while, some of what's in NSPIRE is very similar to what was in UPCS, this is our opportunity, right, to revisit things like that. It's our opportunity to revisit scoring even, right? And say, how do we want these inspections scored? It's our opportunity to revisit remediation, and, and we're taking that opportunity very seriously. Like, this is not about, addressing the standards kind of at the margin. Hopefully we are making changes that we are all, happy with and can support. It makes sense, for us as HUD, as the regulating agency and the funder, but also for you all as, also the owners and operators and funders as well, locally, of your various programs. So I'm looking forward to the discussion in this regard. I am aware of there were many comments on this. So, but we do talk about it quite a bit, and we're definitely going to open this topic up for discussion and reconsideration as we move forward.
Sure, that's a really great answer, because the issue that they're talking is at least two issues. One, which is that there are plenty of times where the PHA or the owner isn't aware of damage to units. So you can have for PHAs already have for public housing their annual inspection process, and that'll be obviously mandated for multifamily going forward once the rule is final. But you can conduct those. You have a functional work order system, and you don't always get the correct information from your residents. I remember I went out on a a work order. I went back when I was consulting with a large housing authority. I'm just going out with the maintenance guys, and we get to a unit, and work order says that the lock needs to be repaired for the entry door to the unit. And we get there, and sure, the lock does need to be repaired, but that's because the entire door had been kicked in, and so the door needed to be replaced. There was problems with the frame, and so the mismatch between information in terms is important, but also the opportunity here is that under the rule, HUD is going to be collecting a lot more data than it does currently. And so obviously a housing provider today has to every day make decisions and determinations about wear and tear to units, about damage, and be able to, in some cases, when you're initiating a court action, you have to be able to substantiate your point, which is that there was excessive damage to a unit, which you seek to hold a tenant legally accountable for. And I think there's just enough information and enough practice, like you're saying, years of experience from all parties to be able to figure that out and ensure fairness for both the tenant and for the owner of the unit and the manager as well. So I'm glad that's being considered. So I'll ask a question that we spoke about, the groups. So for all those participants here, we have biweekly talks with PIH leadership and the industry groups. And so in the last call, we talked about the 28-day notification, which, as you discussed earlier, as part of the this year, and a modification to REAC's plans to cope with the pandemic. And so the question around that is that I know, like, as of now, you're assuming that at some point you'll go back to the 14-day notification period. And so you all already know that, PHAs, owners, managers don't like that. We know that. We've heard the same thing from inspectors, that it's a hardship. And so I'm wondering, because if we rewind, and when this whole thing started about NSPIRE and the 14-day notification, which some people apparently wanted to be an even shorter 3 or 7 day notification period, way back when. These are people in your building, in HUD anyway. One of the things was, this is necessary because of the huge business and huge kind of schemes that POAs engage in to do last minute maintenance for units and repairs when they know a REAC inspection is coming. And it was interesting because we heard that, but we also heard from DJ at the time that 90 or 95% of owners and operators were doing the right thing. And so it was a small problem for a small number of properties or owners or PHAs, what have you. But then we got this new rule rolled out into the entire industry. So I'm wondering, not what your plans are, but are you collecting any data around the impact of the 14-day notification that informs a decision about whether to go forward with it? Because one of the things that we all kind of acknowledged was that the changes in part were spurred by really, troubling media reports about public housing and multifamily conditions. And so there was a response in part that was about getting to the bones of what's going on, which I think is what NSPIRE gave us. But that 14-day notification was really rolled out kind of separate from a wholesale examination of the inspections. And so I'm wondering how you consider whether that's an effective tool or not, and what we could expect going forward in terms of you collecting that information and really determining whether it should continue or not, absent kind of political considerations.
Sure. And once again, another good question. And certainly a fair question. I think you correctly pointed out, and as we discussed recently, HUD has no plans of making permanent the 28-day notification. But that being said, what I will say is, when we return to a 14-day notification, we'll do it with plenty of notice. And then additionally, I really like what you're asking here, which is, does HUD have any information or data or analysis to, evaluate, right? What is the notification period, and have we, and do we think that the 14-day notification period has resulted in better, kind of more accurate inspections, where that anecdotally, the concern, as you pointed out, was at least the concern that HUD's had, historically over the years, is, people are crashing the inspection, and there's, an industry that's kind of built up around, preparing for an inspection and maximizing inspection score results. And I think, that you're asking, like I said, a fair question, which is, do we have the notification period right? And, I do think that this can also be part of, the broader kind of discussions around NSPIRE. And, there are, we believe, right, that there are aspects of the NSPIRE standards that we obviously think, and we hope, and we feel pretty confident, beyond just hope, that the NSPIRE standards will result in a better inspection, right? And so, if you kind of accept that premise, that as we update the standards and we create this new NSPIRE standard, is it possible that the NSPIRE standard is essentially notification agnostic, right? That you would get the same results from an NSPIRE inspection if you gave 30 days notice or 3 days notice, right? So that would be something that I would absolutely want to look at, right? Which is to say, hey, what is maybe the right notification period? There's also something to be said, right, for and full acknowledgement here. Maybe it's not a bad thing, right, that people crash their properties and do a bunch of things prior to the inspection. We hope that most, and we think obviously that most of you are not needing to crash, right? Because you are great operators of housing, and you are routinely, out there and making sure your units are safe. But at the same time, maybe there are some that whether they lack the resources or lack the staff, or there's other issues there, they need the incentive or the motivation to get out there and really kind of spend some time on their properties. And so, we of course prefer that you are just doing what we think that you guys all do, that the good operators of housing do. They care about the condition of the properties. They care about the condition of the units that their residents live in. They're doing the necessary routine maintenance that they can do. So yeah, this is an interesting discussion. I think that, like a lot of things, I would, put this also kind of in the realm of things that we might take a look at, right, as part of the operationalizing of NSPIRE.
So I want to make two comments, and now I ask you a question that you can get out of here on. And we have a minute left on the schedule, but take as much time as you really want to answer the question. But my first two comments are: one, there was an initial timeline, obviously, that we're very far off for the NSPIRE demonstration and when that all will be final. So if we could get an updated one of those that's maybe on the website, on the NSPIRE website, I think that would be useful for folks to think about the timeline. And two, we do have a question about technology. And so there's for the self-inspections, this system to, for work orders to maybe collect some of that data, or to close out, like you said, the health and safety deficiencies. So if we could just get some information again, maybe on the website about where that's going and what PHAs and owners can expect, that would be helpful. And then the question I'll give you for you to answer at, take as much time as you want. Hopefully our participants can stick around for the end of the answer, was what will NSPIRE give us differently in terms of appeals for those inspections and scoring? Are you thinking about approaching that in a different way than that's approached already? There was some language in the proposed rule about that, but that's something that's kind of in the thorn of a lot of people's side, and I think will only increase, especially as we're shifting to more focus and weighting we expect on the units, for all the reasons we talked about earlier with tenant caused damages. So as much time as you want, please go ahead.
Yep. So I'll do this rapid fire. So first, I would say that we are working on providing a solution, a technology solution for PHAs to be able to conduct their own NSPIRE inspections. Stay tuned on that. That's also one of the things that we're working on and an output of our NSPIRE demonstrations, but actively working with the HUD CIO to provide that solution sooner rather than later. But in terms of the appeals process, the technical review and database adjustment process, and just generally, I would just say kind of the administrative process in general. From my standpoint, and I probably sound like a broken record here, but everything is on the table. And I will share with you that we also have concerns about the existing TRDBA process. It can be a very frustrating process, not just for you all, but for us. And it can be very, very time consuming. And, you have to look at these things and say, I'm spending this much time, and not just we, right? You all are spending this much time on, submitting technical review documentation and or requesting DBAs. What value are we getting out of that? Is that a commensurate value that we all collectively find worthwhile? I don't want to speculate that how you would answer the question, but I can say that that's a process that we would very much like to improve and streamline quite substantially, however we can. I saw one questioner asked, would we consider sharing the results of the inspection kind of prior to leaving site? And, I don't know, but that's an interesting idea. And so certainly we would be looking for any ideas, to help improve that process. It's administratively time consuming for you and for us. And I get the luxury, right, of having, even though I've been familiar with REAC and been working with REAC very closely for a number of years, I've never been in this role, right? And, I've only been in this role for about 7 weeks now. So, I'm looking forward to potentially digging into some of these things and even, revisiting some things that maybe haven't been looked at in a while and could use a good look. And this is definitely one of those. I would genuinely hope, and I will be disappointed if this is the case. I will be disappointed if our review and appeals process isn't a far better, less administratively cumbersome, less time consuming process than it is today for you and for us. I want it to be transparent and I want it to be fair, but I want it to be, effective and efficient, right? And I think that's going to benefit us all. If we're spending less time going back and forth about, what an inspection score should be, or whether an inspector, reviewed something that incorrectly, that's time that we all could be better, that could be better spent on serving, those households in need and working across multiple areas to improve our service delivery, our programs, and work on our, like I said, I very much believe, PHADA and HUD's priorities are aligned, our goals are aligned, we want the same thing. So, it'd be great if, our PHAs and PHADA and HUD can, be focused on those things. And I think we very much are. But if we can reduce the administrative burden of the technical review and database adjustment process, and that helps everybody, I'm all for it. And that's not the only place I would say that. So.
Sure. Well, I think that, we appreciate you being, open, transparent, collaborative. Your first 7 weeks in the role have, from an outsider's view, going really well. In terms of, all those things that I talked about, continuing the true partnership that FADA and the industry have with the department, with REAC. And so, I hope that you're able to have, success in that role for as long as you want to be there. I don't know what, the department's thinking and things of that nature for down the line, but we really appreciate, obviously your presence here, but all the conversations and your accessibility offline as well. And so with that, Blake, I'm not sure if you're supposed to say anything or if I'm supposed to close out, but this has been, I think, a really wonderful session. I know the recording will be made available for all those who want to go back, and then we'll try to get some of the additional questions that were posed answered in writing, perhaps for something on our website or something in the future for those questions that we didn't get to.
Great. Thank you, Seth, and thank you all for being here today.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks, Ash. Thanks, Seth. That was a very interesting conversation. So this does end our current session. We would like to thank all of you who attended today and for your questions. We'd also like to remind everyone, Seth just mentioned, a recording of this will be available on the Whova app shortly. And we are also inviting everyone to please take the session survey in Whova. Those responses are very helpful for us. So we're now going to be taking about an hour break before the next sessions begin, during which time, please feel free to stretch, grab some coffee, networks with your fellow attendees on Whova, and please visit the exhibitors in the virtual exhibition hall in the app as well. We will see you around 1 o'clock for the next sessions at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks very much.